Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Velero community meeting / open discussion. My name is Jonas Roslin, and today we're going to go over a bunch of stuff regarding the Velero project, per usual. So let me share my screen with the meeting notes. And if you have any questions or concerns or comments, just unmute yourself or voice them in the chat. All right. So we're going to kick off with status updates. Steve, do you have anything?
Yeah, not too much. I mean, the last week has basically been kind of locking down, getting ready to cut the first beta for 1.2. So I think we're getting pretty close there, and I think we should be able to ship one of those this week. We've got, let's see, we've got the the plugin code extracted into their own repositories. We've got images building and pushing up to Docker Hub. So just locking down a couple more things, and then I think we'll be ready to release that beta. So yeah, mostly just that and keeping up with reviews and PRs that are coming in from the community. I think that's about it. So I'll pass it over to Carlicia next.
Hello, everyone. I was going to say some of that, as Sue just said. So we have the plugins, and they also have their own respective images on Docker Hub. Almost done with the PR for extracting the plugins from the code base. Just need to add some documentation, and then we're going to have a script that will help people upgrade with this new setup. That's it. And Anand did a lot of work to get the plugin images on Docker Hub, so that was great.
Thanks, Carlicia. Yeah, I can go. So I was working on CI for pushing images to Docker Hub. And then yesterday there was an issue with the CRD generation where we were just kind of sporadically just seeing updates to CRDs, even though we weren't expecting them. And the reason was because there was a change in the controller gen tool that we're using to generate those. So we've now fixed the version of controller gen so that we don't run into random changes like that in the future. What else? There's a few more things that are pending on just finishing up the repo change. So just changing references to the old GCR image repository to Docker Hub, and removing some of the GCR push scripts. So I'll probably get around to doing that today. Other than that, I've been taking a look at some of the execution hook stuff, the execution hook controller that I'm going to start contributing to. So I've just been having a look at the current POC for that and trying to see where that can go. But that's all I have.
Cool. Carlicia and Adnan, do you think, does tomorrow sound reasonable to be able to cut the beta? Do you think we can get everything wrapped up by then?
I think so, yeah. It sounds like all we're waiting on is just the changing the name of the references to the new Docker Hub repo. Is there anything else that's pending there?
And then getting Carlicia's PR in and maybe a couple of documentation things.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to touch so I'm going to not do the documentation that I had done. I'm going to use the one that you have on your PR and just document how to add a plugin and maybe do the make the plugin flag required, and that's it. So yeah, okay. I think so.
Okay, yeah, so then we'll sort of tentatively plan to try and cut it tomorrow, maybe in the second half of the day or towards the end of the day. But we'll update folks as it progresses.
That sounds good to me. Yep.
Cool. Sounds great.
Cool. Any questions there? All right. Sounds like we have a beta soon. Sweet. Let's move into discussion topics. Steve.
Yeah, related to all the things we've been talking about, I just wanted to touch base with folks live on this again, because I know we had a little bit of back and forth on it earlier on. So now that the plugins are in their own repositories, and we'll be pushing out separate images for those, we do need to decide kind of how we want to version them, at least initially. So we had a little bit of a discussion about whether the kind of the version numbers for the plugins should stay in sync with the Velero version, or whether they should be versioned independently. And I think I think where we landed is that we want them to be able to be versioned independently, because they don't necessarily need to, there's no reason they need to stay in sync. And part of the benefit of having them in their own repositories that they can evolve independently. So I guess the question is, for the initial release, do you all think it makes sense to call them 1.2 and to be initially in sync with the Velero version, or should we just call them 1.0 to make it clear that they're not in sync as far as version numbers with the main Velero binary? So kind of just wanted to see if anyone had any thoughts there.
Can you talk a little about the pros and cons regarding the versioning here? Because from a direct perspective, it looks a little confusing. You might have to have a proper support matrix with everything listed out if you have different versioning. So what's the pro and con with regards to the different versioning structures?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if we were to say we're just going to keep them in sync with the Velero version, the benefit to that is that, it is easier for the user. They're saying, if I'm deploying Velero 1.3, then I'm going to use version 1.3 of the plugin. The downside of that is that it limits our releases to the plugins. So, for example, we essentially couldn't release a new minor version of the plugin until we released the Velero version. So we'd kind of be limited to only releasing new versions of the plugins when we released Velero, which, isn't necessarily a major downside, but it is a limitation.
And another thing too, sorry, I didn't think you were going to say this. If we bump a release of Velero, even if the plugins haven't changed, we'll have to make a release for each one of them. So.
Right, yeah. On the other hand, if if they vary independently, it means we can release either one whenever we need to. But then from a kind of usability perspective, like you said, we need to have that some form of compatibility matrix that indicates if you're using, Velero version X, what are the valid versions of each plugin to be used with that, and that could, vary by plugin. So it's just a little bit more. To keep in mind as you're doing an install.
At what point would a plugin potentially become backwards incompatible? Is it if there was a gRPC change in Velero and then we use a new core or something new there? Is that when?
Yeah, I mean, we theoretically shouldn't be making backwards incompatible changes to the gRPC outside of a major version for Velero. So yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there are changes that we could make in core Velero that would invalidate an existing plugin. I'm not totally sure.
Kalisha, you had a question there where we would put this matrix. What are your thoughts?
I think we have a plugin section.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there, maybe have a new page.
Yeah. So on the documentation for the latest release, then the plugin matrix there, and then keep that up to date.
I guess I would expect it to be in the plugin zone documentation.
It should be there too. I agree, but that would only link that specific plugin, right? Or list that specific plugin to a specific version of Velero. It wouldn't say GCP and AWS and Azure, right?
But usually you'd only want to use one anyway, right? I mean, I guess
True.
if
True.
I was setting it up.
No, I think I agree with Adna. I take what I said back. I think it would be best to just have that in the plugin documentation.
Mm-hmm. So when you go
People
to,
are using,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, if people are using two plugins, they're going to have to read the documentation for both of them. So
Yeah.
Because right
Yeah.
now, all the installation documentation for the plugin is in the plugin docs, not in.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think that would be the best place to put it.
So
Right,
just
yeah, 'cause
point to the compatibility matrix for each plugin in the plugin installation docs, essentially.
Because the specific Velero install command to be run to install Velero with the plugin will be in the plugin repo, and so it probably makes sense to go there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So plugin versioning going to be separate from Velero to have them be independent of each other. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then compatibility matrix documentation will be in the plugin repos itself, and we'll just link to those matrices from the regular Velero docs.
Yeah.
We're just going to link to that to the overall documentation. So
Yeah. That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to think a little bit about how we want to what we want to do with the plugin documentation as far as like when we tag a new release of the plugin, do we go in and like update the version numbers in the, do we want to create like branches for releases and update version numbers there? Or are we just going to keep the master documentation as like the overall compatibility matrix that lists like every past version of the plugin and every version of Velero that it's compatible with? We don't need to figure that all out right now, but we'll have to think about it before too long.
Yeah, sounds good. Any comments, ideas, suggestions?
So I guess my I feel like we should go with 1.0 just to your point, Steve, to make it clear that this is not going to follow the plugin versions. Because even if we did go for 1.2 today and said it was in sync, it would be confusing if we decided to then switch and have it change in the future. And I know we definitely want it to change in the future, so I think just sticking with 1.0 for now is probably the best bet. It sounds like we're not going to change the gRPC API too much. And if we do, I think it's pretty clear what versions we will, the new version plugin or new plugin version would support. So
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Okay, well, thanks for the input, everyone.
Awesome. I do have one thing that I worked on last week was the blog redirect, and I got that working. Carlicia, you weren't a fan of the dates in there. Do you want me to remove those? The reason why I added those is because it's easy for anyone who clicks the link to see when it was when that blog was published. That's why we have the dates in there.
Yeah, no, sorry. And after I added that comment, it was late on Friday, and I realized I didn't speak to the reason why I don't like it. So I'll just have to say it now. I think it unnecessarily dates blog posts. So, for example, that's how it goes with me. If I am looking for something new or newish, and I see it's from 6 months ago, I move on. I'm like, no, I want something newer. But it doesn't. It's just a psychological thing for me. I think it just dates things unnecessarily, and that's one thing. And another thing is that if you look at modern blogs, they don't date articles anymore. They don't date posts. So I think for those two reasons, I don't think we should date our either.
Yeah, no, I'm perfectly fine just removing the dates from the links there. We already have a published date on the blog itself, which is the
Yeah.
most important one. So we can absolutely remove it from the link. I think you bring up a valid question, and I'm the same. If I look for something and it's 6 months or older, well, I'm going to look for something else. So yeah, I'm exactly the same. So if no one has any concerns or anything about that, I'll just make that change and then we can move forward.
Yeah, sounds fine to me. No issues from me.
Cool. All right. Do we have any questions from the community on the call, the community members? Do you have anything you want to raise up with the Velero team? All right, no questions. Then I think we'll move into contributor shoutouts. Steve.
Yeah, I can cover this. I got a handful of contributions over the last week or so. So just go top to bottom. I think these are most recent to least recent. So Rochford K submitted a fix to one of our documentation diagrams. We still had some old references to ARC as the CLI name. So this person updated it to correctly call it Velero. So thanks for that. That was, I don't know that we even had the original source of that image anymore. So I appreciate someone doing that. Then Alexander Demichev noticed that if you do a Velero restore and you remap namespaces, if you have any role bindings or cluster role bindings, they are not correctly updated to refer to the correct namespace. And so he created a couple of plugins, restore item action plugins, that actually correctly remap these namespaces. So that closes a long-standing issue we've had around this not working correctly in certain circumstances. So really appreciate that, that bug fix. Then Frank51 added support for a new flag to the Velero install command. So this is for a scenario where you want to install Velero, but you don't have an initial storage location, backup storage location that you want to configure. So we have this new flag, no default storage location, which allows you to omit providing things like the provider and the bucket that you want to use. So probably not a typical use case for most folks, but can be useful in some scenarios. So thanks for adding that, Frank51. And then SCGO, Scott, we got his PR merged for when you're taking a backup, if you're backing up any custom resources. We didn't have logic that would say, if you're backing up a custom resource, make sure that the custom resource definition for that resource is also backed up. And this is, I would say this was kind of expected behavior if you had the include cluster resources flag set to nil, which is the default, which in other contexts means back up any related cluster scoped resources. So Scott added support for adding this linkage. So if you're backing up a CRD and this flag is nil, then make sure that if you're backing up a custom resource and the flag is nil, make sure you're also backing up the custom resource definition. So, you know, given the kind of rising popularity of CRDs and their use in lots of different applications, this is I'd say a pretty important addition to our functionality. So thanks a lot, Scott, for that change.
Awesome. Thank you so much for everyone for contributing to the project. You're awesome. Any last comments or questions?
Hi, Steve. This is Yun Chen Chen, and actually I'm the Frank 51, and that Josh mentioned. And thank you again for allowing me to merge it to the Velero. I think, and I want to thank you for the comment you mentioned in the pull request, and it really gives me a lot of help. It's really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. We appreciate the contribution, and we're definitely happy to work on pull requests and make sure that they're in a good state. So thanks a lot.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. Thank you to the Velero team. Thank you to the Velero community. You are all awesome. We will see you all next week. Same time, same channel. Have a great rest of your week, everyone, and see you online. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.